I always find the phrase government funded quite interesting, because government funded is me and you. We're funding it. Whatever it is, we're funding it. Governments don't have any money. They take ours and spend it on what they want. But something that's been rumbling around on social media from a few bigger accounts, and David sent me something that he read in Auto Trader about it. It's a bit of a concern. Now, first of all, my concern is with the format of the charity and the people involved in backing it. Their remuneration, how much they get from the jobs that they do, whatever that is, and the way we are treated as members of the public. This is not about whether or not people are qualify for disabled benefit. I'm not judging disabled people. This is way beyond their remit. They're at the end of the line of a long list of things that go on before they get a mobility vehicle. Now, Motability is a charity designed to get people who can't get about in vehicles. Make it a bit cheaper and more affordable for them. Do you remember, well, when I was a kid, mobility vehicles looked like a flying clog. They were a little three-wheeler. I think they were even electric. They were like a glorified wheelchair almost, to get people who were physically infirm out and about. That's where it came from. What concerns me is, according to Auto Trader, which is a reputable magazine with facts and figures, the biggest fleet buyer in the country for vehicles is Motability, bigger than anyone else. 815,000 vehicles that they bought. It really seems a bit of a... I've had to write it down because it's that complicated. I don't know which way to go about it, but let's look at who owns Motability. It's owned by 4 banks. So I've looked at 2 of them. Obviously, I don't know how the other 2 will be wrong. Let's look at HSBC and Barclays. HSBC, in 2023, the chairman of HSBC earned about £5.5 million. In 2024, the chairman earned £10 million. Pretty similar story for Barclays. 2023 and £4.5 million, boom, he's up to £10 million for a wage for 1 year. What do these people spend their money on? Well, maybe look at some of the yachts in the south of France. I'm not saying that they've done that, but that's where money comes from. Now, the thing is, you don't suddenly get a rise in disabled people unless there's been something like an air crash or a bus crash and people have been disabled. You don't normally get a rise, but in 2024, around about June, there was a rise of 15% in Motability vehicle sales. So that means 15% more people need that kind of vehicle, doesn't it? That's how I read it. So thinking out loud, in 2023, pre-tax profits for Motability was over £700 million pre-tax profits. Yet in 2024, there's a rise of 15% more vehicles being sold, which leads you to assume there's 15% more disabled people, and yet they made a loss of £500 million, how much is it? 564 million, which is over £500 million losses. This is the same year where the owners of the banks had massive pay increases. I'm not correlating that, I'm just explaining 2 points. I'm really quite perplexed how suddenly you can have 15% more disabled people. The CEO of Motability was paid £460,000 last year with a bonus of £198,000. The financial officer, the CFO, he earned £374,000 and got paid a bonus of £114,000. Now, charities, the only difference between a charity and a business is that you're not allowed to make profit if you're a charity. But what about your expenses? I mean, I've been involved in a charity whereby when it comes to the end of the year, if you've got any money left in the bank account, they're desperate to spend it. Which is why I left it, because I thought this isn't set up very good, is it? There's loads of money there, so all of a sudden it gets spaffed away at the end of the year on things they don't really need, as long as they don't have any money left in the bank. and contractors tend to, contractors for services and supplies tend to bump the prices up, and they'll pay them because they have to get rid of that money. Not saying it goes on in all charities, but it leads me to ask questions about just what this Motability charity is on about. It's the biggest fleet owner in the country. It's making a loss when yet it's had an increase in sales. How the hell does that work in a business? I've never been involved in a business that's had an increase in sales that's created losses from a previous year where huge profits were made pre-tax and with less customers. That's basically it, isn't it? In a nutshell, that's what's happened here. This is nothing to do with disabled people. This is to do with the setup of the charity and what's actually happened. The only reason you can have a 15% increase, to me, if there's no extra disabled people popping up, there's been no air crash, there was 500 injured in that and 1,000 injured in this, we've been to war. If there's nothing big that's created more disabled people, then it can only be driven by legislation, by a government. I'm assuming. Obviously, you can correct me if I'm wrong on the thread. So what changed in 2024 that enabled this influx of people to buy disabled vehicles and yet no increase in disabled people? How does that work? This is taxpayers' money. So everything I've just told you is taxpayers' money. It's owned by banks, but it's not allowed to make a profit. But if you're paying big salaries out and you're buying vehicles, they're buying, a lot of your electric vehicle sales, when they're saying sales are really well, doing really well, if you've got the biggest fleet buyer in the country buying them, that also enhances vehicle sales, or the way it looks to the public. But is that the reality of what's going on? I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm getting warning bells similar to HS2. HS2, it's never ever going to be finished. An MP, Andrew Bridgen, has said to me many times, he sees it as a wealth transfer scheme, which is an excuse. A wealth transfer scheme is what can be perceived as a mechanism to draw money from the tax system to be spent on X, Motability, HS2, whatever. It doesn't just think of your own, and it gets it out the tax system, and is in HS2's. The thing that concerns me with that is it's just blowing good money after bad. Nobody really cares that a businessman can get to Birmingham an hour quicker by using HS2. Not when the infrastructure of our railways nationally need attention, they need repairing. And especially not when you think railways are owned by some German companies like our power. Most of the power that we use comes from French companies. So all I'm doing is I'm highlighting, I must be onto something, because I was researching it and I mentioned it to a friend of mine, and he said that, is he called Jeff Buys Cars? He's looked into it. Now, if a bloke like Jeff Buys Cars is seeing this the way I'm seeing it, we can't both be wrong, can we? It's not that order bullshit again, is it? Goodness me. So, whilst we concentrate on the infighting and squabbles of one particular new party, I think there's so many things going on that are going to get neglected if we don't get back on form and highlight these things to the wider public. I had no idea this was going on till my husband read out an article in Auto Trader, and he wasn't reading it out maliciously. He was saying, have you seen this? And I thought, Auto Trader, like I'm interested. I bought my car last year and I won't be buying another for about another 3. I love my vehicle. I've blown silly money on cars over the years. But the Motability thing, are we being done over? Motability is behaving no differently to a lot of other charities, like British Heart Foundation, Cancer Research. They're all at it. They all pay big salaries. So we have to pay these big salaries or we won't get good people. But this, I think, owned by banks and the CEOs on film star wages, here we are again, aren't we? How many more times are we going to get slapped? And this is nothing to do with disabled people. I have a relative who's very disabled physically and needs her a mobility scooter, and she's entitled to it because it gives her independence. I completely agree with all that. But what I don't agree with is the structure. The structure of how the internal cogs of this kind of shit works. Because we're picking up the tab. And, you know, how can a company have a 15% increase in business, and from the previous year with £700 million profit go from that to a £500 million loss? Work the difference out. That is huge, huge. Needs looking into.